Okay, so let's talk about how to set up the development environment for Java web programming. There's a written guide on this process on CSNS Wiki, and you can go to that page directly at this URL. Or if you don't want to remember the URL, just go to CSNS Wiki and search for something like web development or Eclipse and Tomcat, and it's pretty easy to find. And here it is. So the first step is, of course, we need to install Java. And most of you probably already have Java on your computer for other classes. In case you haven't installed Java before, just go to Oracle and grab the JDK. As you can see here, there are lots of different Java packages. You have the SE, the Standard Edition, or the Enterprise Edition, Mobile Edition, and then you have the JDK, the JRE, the JDK with NetBeans, and so on and so forth. We just need the JDK. We don't need anything else. So pick JDK, click download, and then here you can find the package for your platform. Most of you probably will be using Windows, so it will be either the x86 or x64. Then for the newer computers, you are probably going to need the x64. If you are not sure, just right click on your computer, click Properties, and then you'll see the Windows version of your computer. If it says a 64-bit operating system, that means you need the x64, this one. So download that, install it, following the GUI installation wizard and all that, and then you should have Java installed. And if you type Java dash version in a console window, you should see something like this. Okay. So once you have Java installed, you should set something called an environment variable, and you should set up an environment variable called Java home. And this step is, I believe, not absolutely necessary now with newer version of Java and Eclipse, but there's no harm to set it up anyway. And it's generally a good thing to do, especially when your computer have maybe several versions of Java, JRE, or JDK installed. To set up this environment variable, again, right-click on Computer, select Properties, and then Advanced System Settings, right, this one. And in Advanced System Settings, you can see environment variables here, and click on that, and then you can either create new environment variables or edit existing one or delete old ones. I already created mine here. As you can see, it's called Java home, and the value should be the path to the folder where your JDK is installed. On my computer, it's installed under Java JDK 1.70_17. So copy that path and put it in here, and then that's that. I already have mine here, so I'm not going to create it again. And the difference between user variables and system variables are that system variables apply to all users, and the user variables only apply to the user who are currently logged in. And it's better that you create it for all users, but obviously you would need the administrative privilege to do that. So that would complete the first step of installing Java, and then you need to install a couple of more things. Well, more than a couple. You need to install Tomcat. That's the application server that we are going to use, and this application server will be running our server side programs. There are several open source / free Java application service we can choose. If you want to have a very large setup, there are things like JBoss. And for us, we are going to want something that's small, doesn't take lots of resources, and nice and simple to use. And for that, typically people would either choose Tomcat or Jetty. And Tomcat, in my opinion, is probably better because for a long time it has been the reference implementation of the Java servlet specification standard, and it's also very widely used. So to get Java, to get Tomcat, go to Tomcat webpage, and you can download Tomcats here. And again, there are lots of different packages that you can download. There's the core, the deployer, extra, this and that, and also different packages for different platforms. What we want is that's the simplest one. That's the core zip package, and I have already downloaded here just to save some time. And then after that, you need to download some additional libraries that you're going to use together with Tomcat. And the first library is the GSTL library, which is very, very important. For whatever reason, it's not included in Tomcat. So download this one. Again, it's a zip file, and then later on we'll extract the Java library jar files from this zip file. And the zip file, again, I have already downloaded here. And then we need a database driver that later on we'll use to connect to our MySQL database. And so go to mysql.com and then download this database driver. Now, if you click on the link in the guide, it will take you here, and then there's a installer. We don't really want to use the installer because then you have to have the administrative privilege to install it, and so on. So instead of the Windows installer, select platform independent, and this again will give us a zip file that we can just unzip and then grab the jar file inside it. So download this zip package, and there are a couple of links here asking you to log in or sign up, but there's a less visible link here that you can click by simply skip the login / sign up step. So download that one. Again, I already have it here, right? And then one more thing you need to download is Eclipse. Most of you probably have used Eclipse before in your other classes, and if you haven't, this would be a good opportunity to learn. Eclipse is a Java IDE, very, very good and useful Java IDE, and arguably the most widely used Java IDE. There are a couple of other pretty popular ones like NetBeans, and the commercial one called IntelliJ IDEA. And but Eclipse by and large is the most popular one. Not only it's used as an IDE by itself, but it's also served as a platform, and lots of other IDEs are built on top of this by basically using the basic Eclipse plus lots of plugins. For example, I have my Android development toolkit here, which is actually an Eclipse-based IDE for Android development. And Okay, I digress. Let's close this one. And for Eclipse IDE, there are different versions here. Sorry, different packages. All those packages are built based on the same basic Eclipse platform with different plugins pre-included. Now, the one that we want is this one called Eclipse IDE for Java EE developers. Again, based on your operating system, you'll want to pick either 32-bit or 64-bit or something like that. And so download it. Eclipse is pretty large. It's 200 plus megabytes, so it will take a little while to download depending on how fast your internet connection is. So now these are all the packages that we need, and once you download them, now it's time to set them up. So the nice thing about all these packages is that they don't need any installation. All of them are simply unzip, extract, and then you can run them. So you can do this actually on lab computers as well. You don't need any administrative access to do this. I usually prefer to separate my classes into different folders. So I'm going to put everything for CS320 in this folder under CDISC courses CS320. So let's first unzip Apache Tomcat, and that's it. And then we need to add a couple of additional libraries, the GSTL and the MySQL JDBC driver to the application server. So let's pick GSTL, and then go into the zip file, and under the lib folder, you can see there are a couple of jar files. Those two jar files are what we need for the GSTL library. And you want to put these two jar files under the lib folder of the Tomcat folder. So this is the Tomcat folder. Underneath there's a lib folder. You can see there are already a bunch of jar files there. And then extract these two jar files into the same folder, and that's it for this one. And do the same thing for the MySQL JDBC driver, and this is a jar file, and extract that to this lib folder, and that's that. Okay, so Tomcat now is pretty much ready. As you can see, it's nice and simple. And then we want to install Eclipse. So again, just extract the files in the zip package into a local folder, and that's more or less it. Okay, so let's start Eclipse. Well, it's my laptop is a bit slow, so it takes a little time. Now, when we first start Eclipse, it will ask us to provide a folder for the Eclipse workspace. That's where all the projects that we are going to create in. And it doesn't really matter where you put the workspace, where is the workspace, but again, usually for me, I'd like to just to have a workspace for each different class. So under my CS320, I'll create a folder called workspace, and I'll specify this one as my workspace, and check this one so we don't have to choose a workspace every time. Okay, so this is more or less it about setting up the development environment. Actually, there's one more step. Now, usually after setting up a new Eclipse, I like to change a few default settings to, makes development debugging a little bit easier. And so go to Windows, Preferences, and then you can see that Eclipse lets you to customize lots of different options, lots of them, and so much so that Eclipse actually provide a search box so that you can search for the option that you want to change. Let's search for text. Let's enlarge the window a little bit. Okay. I usually like to change the editors a little bit. So by default, it's showing tab width as 4 characters, and that's fine. But usually I like to use spaces instead of tabs so that the code will display the same way in different editors and IDEs. And I also want to see the print margin, or there will be a line in the editor showing where the 80th column is, and usually I want to keep each line of my code under 80 characters so that it shows nicely without wrapping in a console editor like VI. If you don't use those other editors, it doesn't really matter much. It's just my old habit. And I also like to see the line numbers. It's easier that way when you see a exception and it says null pointer exception at line 22, and with line numbers you can easily and quickly locate that. And then yeah, that's more or less it for the editor. And another thing I usually would like to change is the Java formatter. And the Java formatter would controls how to format the code automatically. And if you are not too picky about how your code would look, the built-in default formatter would work perfectly fine. But I usually would like my code to look certain way, so I have my own formatter here, which is exported from another Eclipse that I used before. So I'll choose this formatter and using the profile called CYSum, and that's that. Okay, so now we have basically set up everything, and but it's good that if we try to actually see if it's all working or not. So instead of just stopping here, let's try to create a project, add a servlet and a JSP, and after that we are actually going to try deploying it on CS3 and see if it works there as well. So to create a Java web project, you can create a project and select the one that's called Dynamic Web Project. And you can give it a name, doesn't really matter what we call it. Let's just call it Web Test. And now if you use this Eclipse for the first time, before you can create a web project, you have to set up something called a target runtime. So this is basically the application server that Eclipse is going to use to run your project. And we don't have any here yet, but we are going to have one soon. So click New Runtime and then pick Apache Tomcat 7. That's the one we downloaded before. And then you can provide the folder where we have extracted the Tomcat Tomcat package that will be under courses 320 Apache Tomcat. Right? That's here. And click finish, and that's that. So now we have a so-called target runtime, and then we can go to the next step. And the next step asks you to select the source code folder and then the default output folder. You can leave this as default source, and then build classes would work perfectly fine. Then click next. Okay, here you need to be careful. So there's something called context root. This is essentially the name of your project. We don't have to worry about that. And the second one is called content directory. This is a folder where you put non-Java content of your web application, things like HTML files, the JSP files, and so on. So again, it's just a folder name, and we don't have to change that, and the default name is perfectly fine. Now, the thing that you need to be careful is the option that says generate web.xml deployment descriptor. Now, you would want to check this one. In older versions of the Java Servlet specification, for each web application, you have to have a file called web.xml. And this file is, as the name suggests, it's a descriptor or description of your whole web application. And newer versions of the Servlet specification, the version since 3.0, no longer requires this file, because the newer version supports the so-called annotations, and lots of configurations and things like that are done in annotations. So this file is no longer absolutely necessary. Now, with that said, you should always have a web.xml file for your project in this class. The reason being that when you deploy your code to the server, to the CS3 server that you are going to use to showcase your projects, the server is set up in such a way that it doesn't automatically detect all the changes in your project. It basically monitors this web.xml file of your projects, and whenever this file is changed, the server will reload your project. So this is quite important for deploying your project on the CS3 server. If you don't have this, you'll run into problem where you uploaded a new version of your project, but somehow the server always seems to show the old version, and then you'll get frustrated. So remember to check this option, and then click finish. Well, the first time takes a bit long, but after that it should be pretty quick. Okay, so now we have a web project, and to see if our environment and setup works correctly, we want to create a couple of items in there. The first one is something called a servlet. We'll discuss what exactly servlets are later on, but basically it's just a piece of program that we run on the server. And so right-click on the source folder and then select servlet, and you should always put your servlet in a package, and I'm going to put it under CS320 servlet, and then give it a name. It doesn't really matter what we call them, but let's just call it hello servlet. Like learning any new programming language, we'll start with a hello world program, and then click next, and those things don't really matter for now. And then finish. Okay, so let me close these two panels. So now we have our first servlet, which doesn't do anything yet, but we'll see what happens after we add a little bit of code in it. Now, notice that the Eclipse will generate a template servlet for you, and you can format the template, format the code a little bit. You can right-click and then select source and then select format, or just click the shortcut, or just use the shortcut Control plus Shift plus F, and that will format your code a little bit so that it's easier to read. And then we want to put in some code in there. And the easiest one is just print out hello world or hello servlet in this case, and put this line in the method called doGet. And that's it. That's our first servlet. And then let's also put in JSP, and we're going to call this JSP hello JSTL.jsp. And this one, let's click on web content, right click on web content, select JSP file, and then this one, let's call it hello JSTL.jsp. Let's just copy over the code from here so we don't have to type in everything. Right? Yes. So in the servlet, the output is supposed to be hello servlet. In the JSP, the output is supposed to be hello JSTL. Now, exactly how everything works, don't worry about that right now. We'll explain everything later on. Right now, just we want to use this couple of things to make sure our development environment is set up correctly. So once we have this two once we have this servlet and the JSP, we can run the projects. Just right click on the project and then select run as, and then run on server. And when you do run on server, it will ask you to choose server, of course, and then we choose Tomcat 7.0, and then next, and then finish. Okay, so when you run the project, you'll see a 4 error or no page found, and that's okay because the servlet and the JSP are at certain URL, and when you run the project, the default URL it uses is simply the project itself. So then where do we find our servlet? Go to the servlet, and notice that there's something here. Right? So later on, we'll explain the servlet annotations and all that. And for now, just understand that this is the URL where this servlet can be accessed. And so in other words, the URL should be hello servlet, and so it should be basically this one. So manually put that URL here and go to that URL, and you'll see hello servlet, right? And that shows us that our servlet now is working correctly. Now the URL for the JSP is simpler. There's no annotation or anything. It's simply the name of the JSP, like a static HTML page. So manually type hello JSTL.jsp here, and we see the output hello JSTL, right? And that shows that this JSP is working correctly as well. Now, if you get to this step, then it means that your local development environment is working perfectly, and then that's great. But there's one last step. In this class, you have to deploy all your homeworks, your labs, and exams on this CS3 server. And because we cannot grade your work on your computer, we cannot go to your home and to see your project run on your computer. But the nice thing about web programming is that you can put it on a server and then everybody can see it. And the server that you are going to use for this class is what we call the CS3 server. This is the host name of the server, cs3.calstatela.edu. That's why it's called CS3, of course. And on this server, we already installed a bunch of software for you, including the Tomcat application server, including MySQL server, and some other stuff. Now, for CS320 classes, you'll get the Apache PHP, you'll get Tomcat, and then you'll get MySQL, but you don't have anything else. And since we are using Tomcat, you should read at least this section. So this section tells you where you should place your place the files of your project, the class files, the additional libraries, and so on and so forth. So read this one and follow the instructions. Basically, what you would do is you would upload the files onto the server in the right directory, and then you can access your project on the server. So the first thing, of course, is find out where your files are. So if you go to your workspace, remember the workspace folder that we just created. And under workspace, you can see that there are a few folders there. Most of those folders right now are created automatically by Eclipse to keep track of various things. And but there's also a folder that's created because we created a project. And remember, this is our project web test, and everything for the web test project is in this folder under your workspace. Now go to this folder. You can see that you have the web content where you have your JSP and stuff, and then you have build and then classes. This is a folder where all the compiled class files are at. And there are some other folders and files which are not important for deployment purpose. Now, to deploy your code onto CS3, you need something that you can use to transfer files. And I use this program called WinSCP. And you can also use something like FileZilla, which is another open source software that you can download. And either way, just open up whatever file transfer software you use, and then connect to the CS3 server under your account. You should already got an email with the information for your account on CS3 server. The username should be something that looks like CS320 and student, and then two numbers after, 2 digits after that. And I'm going to use the account CS320STU31, and the host name is, of course, cs3.calstatela.edu. And file protocol, you should choose SFTP or the secure FTP, and leave the port number as default. And let's put in my password. Okay, so now we are connected to the CS3 of my account. And in this account, you can see that there are already a couple of folders created for you. One is called public_HTML. The other one is www. www is the folder that you want to use. And also notice that there's a small arrow icon at the lower left corner of www. This indicates that this folder is actually a so-called symbolic link, or in Windows terminology, it's a shortcut to another folder. It doesn't really matter where that actual folder is, but just remember for now that this is a folder you are going to use to place your project files. So click on this folder. You can see that there's a web info folder there, and so that www folder by and large corresponds to your web content folder on your local computer. So you can see that on your local computer you have web info, and on the server you also have web info, right? And that should give you some indication of where you should put your files. In particular, hello.jstl.jsp, you should just put it here, right? And at the same level as the web info folder. And then you would want to upload your class files, and those are the compiled servlets. And on your local computer, those class files are under build and then classes, right? And on the server, they should be put under web info classes. Now, notice that the server folder doesn't correspond to the local folder anymore, and that's okay. So just remember that web / classes on the server corresponds to your build classes locally. So upload all the files under the classes folder. Now, if you remember your Java, remember that Java packages corresponds to the folder structure, because in the servlet that we created are in this package cs320.servlet. So the compiled class file is under a folder cs320, another folder servlet, and then the class file, right? And you want to keep the folder structure that corresponds to the package name. So don't just upload the class files themselves. You want to upload everything, including the subfolders. So where is my yeah, here. So just grab this one and the whole thing and upload it to the server. Okay, so now we have both the servlet and the JSP on the server. The one last thing we need is the web.xml file. Remember that we mentioned earlier that we should have a web.xml file, and this would basically tells the server on CS3 that it needs to reload our project to refresh the new content that we uploaded. So the last step we do is to upload this file, and this file is under web info, so you should upload it to the web info folder on the server, and upload it right there, right? Okay, so now we have everything on the server. And then where do we access those things? So as it says here, so the URL you want to use is cs3.calstatela.edu and then port number 8080, because Tomcat is running under this port number of the server, and then your username, and then the servlet name or the JSP file name. So grab this one, and then go to that URL. My username on CS3 is CS320STO31, and then my servlet, well, it's not exactly servlet name, it actually should be the servlet URL pattern, but by default it will be the same as the servlet name. So it should be this one /hello servlet. And we see hello servlet here. That's great. That means our servlet is now running correctly on the CS3 server. Let's check the JSP. So it's called hello.jstl.jsp. and we see hello JSTL, and that's pretty much it. Now you have set up your development environment on your local computer. Everything works correctly inside Eclipse, and then you also uploaded your project files on CS3, and you can see that now it's also working correctly on CS3. So, the next step would be actually learning how to program servlets and JSP, and enjoy the class from there. Okay, that's it for this lesson.